My first campaign for Whitney was, how do you spell Whitney Houston? Inevitable. Inevitable. What comes on the screen? 3 lines on Usher. The whole crowd singing it. I remember sitting with Bocelli in his home in 40 Damami. Yeah, I'm going to name drop. Hang on. Rod's white, but sings black. Tina's black, but sings white. It takes 2. I'm going to do a minute version as well, whatever this is going to be. And it ended up being Ghostbusters. And he reaches for her hand, and he says in French, I want to f*** her.
Jesus. On TV? On live TV?
In French. Live TV. Live TV. Never underestimate the power of luck.
Before we start the next episode, just want to say a huge thank you very much to everybody who has tuned in, subscribed, liked. We couldn't do this without you, and we're going to do everything in our power to make this one of the best music podcasts ever. But we do need your support. Please like, subscribe, share with your friends, but always click that subscribe button so we can keep sending you the best podcasts. So here's the next episode. Thanks. Hello and welcome back to Loud Unfiltered, the podcast where we deep dive in with some figures and voices who have shaped the music and event space over the decades. Today we have an extremely exciting guest on, and I'm delighted to have him on. Slightly different to our normal guest programming, who's kind of centered quite a lot around the electronic space, but this man needs no introduction, although I shall give you one. He's been involved in some of the most incredible labels and biggest labels in the world, having worked with and discovered some huge artists across the music space. He's been involved in a whole load, and I'll let him talk a little bit more, but I'm delighted to welcome Mr. Rick Blaskey.
Thank you, Josh. I mean, this is that was quite an introduction. I don't know if I can live up to that, but I'll try.
Oh, I'm sure you will. I'm sure I've heard enough stories from you to know you will definitely live up to the moniker. So, listen, I guess as a starting point, for those that don't know you, give us a little bit of a background in you and what you've done, and this incredible career that you have shaped.
Well, it all starts with a love of music. Actually, it all starts with because it's the only thing I could do, because I couldn't become a footballer or a tennis player. So
it was the knee.
Yeah, it was everything. But no, it actually started. If you want to know the very beginning, it started on a train when I was 16. I was living in Sheffield, as you can tell from my broad Yorkshire accent, coming down to London, and the man who I suppose was really the Simon Cowell of the last century, I won't say when, was a guy called Huey Green, and he just happened to be sitting in our train compartment. And I used to watch his show, which was called Opportunity Knocks, very much X Factor, Britain's Got Talent, but it was the first. And I used to love it. And the extraordinary thing about that show is that it probably discovered 5 platinum-selling artists every series.
Right.
You know, we got used to maybe one with X Factor or Britain's Got Talent, or maybe 2. And this was comedians, this was singers, this was novelty acts, this was ventriloquists, this was comedians, this was everything. But obviously, the one I was interested in was music. And I heard myself say to this icon, why don't you have more music on your program? And the paraphrase that came back was, well, if you think you can find music acts, come down to the auditions.
Right. Okay.
And I needed no second invitation. And in the school holidays, I inveigled my way into some of the auditions around the country. Probably around London, I guess, because we'd moved to London by then. And then when I left school, I certainly wasn't going to go to university. And I went into advertising. And I remember why I went into advertising. I loved the idea. The advertising industry was known as the hidden persuaders.
Right.
And for some reason, I've always loved persuading people that something I love is worth sharing.
Okay.
And I think I have pretty Catholic tastes. So I think if I like it, I'm from Sheffield, I sort of have very broad tastes. And seeing these auditions, seeing some of these acts, all I could think of is they either deserve a bigger stage or they don't. And those that did, I'm already thinking, because I was a record buyer, and I love songs. To me, artists come and go, songs live forever. And I loved the idea of the fact that in 3 months' time, after these auditions, 16 to 18 million people will be watching this show on a Monday night. And I remember saying to Huey, why don't we make records with these people? And he said, because I'm making a TV program. And I remember in my naive little way, I remember saying, but they're going to be on in 3 months' time. The next morning, people would want to buy the record, because I would, if it's the right fit of artist and song.
Mm-hmm.
And the penny didn't drop. So a bit later I said to him, but do you know anyone who works in a record company? Because that's really what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Advertising was great, and it gave me
did you say this when you were 16?
No, when I left school at 18, 19, I then went into, I was a dog's body in an advertising agency. But wow, was that a great education in the consumer, in FMCG marketing, understanding a brand, and who's the audience. And that was always my fascination with Opportunity Knocks, with the TV show, is the audience. 16 to 18 million people. And Huey's byline was, give the people what they want. And I've never forgotten that. And so I said to him, do you know anyone who works for a record company? And he sort of said, well, yeah, probably know someone. And I begged for an introduction. And he introduced me to a guy called Steve Gottlieb. Talk about legends. Did I know who Steve Gottlieb was? No. Steve Gottlieb was the chairman of what was then Polygram, which is now Universal.
Yeah.
This was probably the most important man in the music industry. Who knew?
Yeah.
I certainly didn't. So I go and have a meeting with Steve and stutter whatever I'm saying. And he obviously sees that I'm like an A&R scout. I'm seeing these auditions.
Mm-hmm.
And why doesn't he give me some job in one of their labels and bring in the acts from the TV show and make the records, etc. And so I get a job as there were two trainees at Phonogram, as it then was. I was a trainee in the record company, Dog's Body, and the guy downstairs in the studio was a guy called Steve Lillywhite, who then went on to produce U2 and everything else. So if I could pull rank over anyone, it was Steve Lillywhite, not that I would. I was allowed by, we all know who Lucian Grange is. Well, my boss was Lucian's brother, Nigel, who was brilliant. Nigel discovered Sinead O'Connor and the Boomtown Rats, and he was much more rock and pop and dance. So all this stuff that I was finding from TV world, he just let me sort of bring it in, and we ended up with million seller after million seller after million seller. And to me, this wasn't rocket science. This is Huey's motto: give the public what they want, put it in front of them on a Monday night, and the next morning you'll see the sales. People will buy it or they won't. And they did. Millions and millions of records that broke artists that I won't even mention the names because they've been forgotten. But funny enough, on the other side of it, with comedians, some of the biggest comedians that that shaped the comedy world, Les Dawson, can't think of any others off the top of my head, but I mean, suffice to say that at any one time, the 5 biggest summer shows, the end of the pier shows, were all headlined by Opportunity Knocks acts.
Wow.
It was the BGT X Factor of its time, but more powerful. And so I spent 5 fantastic years at Phonogram, really being Mr. MOR, starting in sort of marketing and then A&R and then international. And then I got headhunted to Arista, which had just sort of opened in London. It was Bertelsmann owned Areola, which was a big German label, and they'd acquired this label in America called Arista, which was really just starting. And I just loved everything on the roster. That was really, Phonogram was all about rock, really, apart from my lot. Whereas Arista was Barry Manilow, Aretha Franklin, Dionne Warwick, Air Supply, Alan Parsons Project, melodies, adult music rather than, I couldn't be hip and cool if I tried. And so
that's it off quite well.
I don't know about that. And so, that was a dream. So, working with, whether it's because I'm Jewish as well, I got a real affinity for Barry Manilow. I got him and I got the audience. And the fact that all my family, for once, who didn't really know what job I did.
Oh, Barry Manilow.
Oh, Barry. Oh, you work with Barry.
We know that one.
I'm validated.
Yeah, okay.
And really, Barry had like one or two little hits. Well, not little hits, Copacabana and Mandy, but wasn't really an artist that was selling.
Yep.
And I was really into albums, and I'm really into songs. So I would hear track 3 on side 2 or track 8 on whatever. And I would think, you know, he is crafting some of the greatest songs, whether he wrote them or he didn't. And he did not write I Write the Songs, which is an interesting one. That was written by Bruce Johnson of the Beach Boys. But, and that song, you know, if you listen to it, it's not I write the songs, it's and I am music and I write the songs. Music writes the songs. And I just love the craftsmanship. And that's, I guess, when I started, a little bit earlier, I started matching song to artist, lyrically and persona, who's the audience, what are you trying to say? And a lot of, you know, working with Clive Davis, who was Mr. Arista, it was a fantastic lesson in A&R, artist and repertoire, artist matching the repertoire and vice versa, and who's the audience. So we broke, you know, I was running at the time, after many, many years, I was running this sort of international A&R side from London. And then they asked me to take over and run that from New York,
right?
Which sort of made an awful lot of sense because all the artists were Americans. Yeah. And I wasn't really involved in our UK roster, which was having huge success, but nothing to do with me. I was fighting the UK company to give legroom to the stuff from America. Yeah. And which wasn't really prioritized. Plus the fact the Americans, you know, they had a hard enough job to work America. To actually get an act to come to Germany or Holland or Australia or wherever was really tough. But when we did, there was a whole new world out there for them. So I loved the idea that Clive would invite me to run the international side from New York, because that's where I thought I could do the most damage.
Okay. Yep.
And
how old were you then? How old were you now?
I was late 20s, early 30s. So I was young. I was very young. And, you know, to be vice president of international of an American label, it was like your dream come true.
Yeah, nice.
But I couldn't do anything else. So it was like, you know, it was great. And who wouldn't want to go and live in New York for a few years?
Yeah, why not?
So that started a really interesting, if Huey was my first mentor, Clive and Barry, but Clive Davis, the lessons he taught me, and he's still going strong at 92.
Yeah. And then, so that was what, early 80s this is now?
That was early, middle 80s, yeah.
Great. And then New York, so that, and then New York set off a whole new chain of events for you, right? There are a couple of interesting discoveries.
Well,
there's I'm going to prompt you into one of my favorite stories. Ricky, you've told me, you know, we've known each other for a long time, most of my life. And some of the stories you've told me are just mind-blowing. But there's a couple in particular, and I want to let you lead into this one now.
Well, I mean, they aren't actually mind-blowing, but, you know, when it happens, it just sort of happens. Yeah. And, you know, I look back and now you prompt me, I think my first week in New York, I mean, if that didn't shape, I have an artist who sold 8 million records, and I've never known anyone work so hard, practice so hard. And his motto for life is, never underestimate the power of luck.
Yeah.
And I think the luck that I had in my first week in New York was to be in the right place at the right time. Mm-hmm. But I guess another great definition of success is when preparation meets opportunity.
Yep.
So you might get the opportunity, but how do you turn it into success? So my first week in New York, they say to me, first thing is they say, we'll take you out for dinner. Where do you want to go? I say, a supper club. They looked at me as if, what? And I say, well, we don't have supper clubs. I love the idea of sitting down, having dinner and watching music.
Okay.
So they said, okay, well, there's this one on the east side, there's this one on the west side. And I'd vaguely heard of the old diva singing on the west side. She'd sung with Elvis's backing, the New Inspirations or whatever, the Elvis's backing girls. And so we go to this club called Sweetwater's on the west side.
Yeah.
And we go and see this old diva singing with very young male and female backing singers, and to backing track. Halfway through the act, she says, I want to introduce my backing singers. This is my son, Gary. Gary does a Luther Vandross song.
Right.
And this is my daughter, Whitney.
Okay.
To this day, Josh, I can remember the song that she sang. And I'm normally about melodies. I'm a lyricist and I worship the melodies.
Yeah.
This isn't the greatest melody, but we were hanging on. If I tell you the song, if you know it, I was hanging on her every word. This is a movie had come out with Michael Jackson and Diana Ross called The Wiz.
Right, yeah.
And there's a song in it called Home.
Home. Okay.
Which I've never heard anyone else sing.
Yeah, I don't know if I know it.
She did it on one other TV show, never recorded it. And the lyric is, when I think of home, I think of a place with love overflowing. When I think of home, I think of those who I love. And it's a narrative.
Okay.
And she's singing it with her brother and her mother on stage. And we're going, and this is a 16-year-old, very innocent looking, naive looking, until she opens her mouth. And storytelling supreme. Long story short, we sign her. Clive's there. We sign her.
On the spot?
Oh, the following week. I mean, it's a no-brainer. Well, every other label's by then sort of picking up on it, but Clive swoops in. And I remember thinking, when I got to Arista, I think the average age of my roster was probably in its 30s or 40s. Aretha, Dion, Alan Parsons, Air Supply, Manilow, and a load of others. And having a 16, 17-year-old at least gave me validity with the younger company people that I was trying to sell our product to in the rest of the world. And so Whitney for me was like, oh, great, I've now got someone young and whatever. And the next sort of year was, for me, I got it. It was like watching an audition on Opportunity Knocks. It was like, I can see the persona, I can hear the voice. Now we need the songs to connect the dots. And who better than Clive to work with to make sure we have the songs? And I think I had an arrangement at that time that on any international priority, I was allowed to choose singles for the international markets, because in those days, the American market was completely governed by radio. So if you were a adult contemporary, you went to adult contemporary radio. If you were R&B, or if you were Quiet Storm, or if you were disco, or whatever genre you rock, you went to those radios before you ever crossed over to top 40. We only had in the rest of the world top 40.
Right.
So, and the funny thing is about Whitney, the first three singles, certainly the first two, I think the third as well, were all R&B.
Yeah.
To get the black audience that they needed to get, you have to get a core audience first. And I was all about, oh no, we got to do pop singles. So things like How Will I Know, Saving All My Love for You, we led with those, and a song called All at Once that probably people don't know, but that was the one that broke her in Europe.
Right.
And it was a fantastic, I mean, it sounds like it was an overnight success. I can't tell you how many times I schlepped her to Europe way before the album was made. Just, my motto was seeing is believing. Actually, it was hearing is believing, and then seeing is believing. Don't believe me. Let me put her on a plane. Let me come and play in the canteen.
Just listen to yourself.
Come and bring your head of TV or whatever, because we knew she would break through TV.
Yeah.
And as they say, the rest is history. But it wasn't an overnight success. In many markets it was, but in England, for instance, they wouldn't even release the album. Wow. I mean, we really had to work a strategy, timing, relentlessness, just to get the UK to release the album. And you think Whitney Houston, same in France. I mean, I've got the greatest story about France. I was so frustrated that the French market was big and chanteuses, female singers, were big, and we had a chanteuse. And I remember sitting with the managing director of the French office in his office one day, and I was so exasperated because they weren't interested. And in those days, the French radio had to play, I think, 60% French quotas of music.
Right.
So we were never going to get a look in.
Yeah. Okay.
Like a red rag to a bull to me, because I think this is global talent. This is the New York Times had just written about Whitney. It'll take an act of Congress to stop her from being a star.
Okay.
And I sort of felt the same way.
Yeah.
And in fact, my first campaign for Whitney was, how do you spell Whitney Houston? INEVITABLE, inevitable. Because I just wanted to shake people up into, listen to this girl, see this girl. And there was no one doing anything like her.
I was literally just about to say, around that time, so early mid-80s, there wouldn't really have been anybody around doing what she was doing then.
And even black music. I mean, black music then, really internationally, was Lionel Richie, Michael Jackson, Stevie Wonder, and Diana Ross.
Mm-hmm.
It was pop, but they were all a lot older.
Yeah.
And I've always looked at, I like being in a minority. I don't like being in the lane that everyone else is in. And to me, what was great is she's the young kid. Everyone else is doing what they're doing, but we've got a story here. She's the young kid. And when you have a song like How Will I Know That He Really Loves Me, every young girl can relate to that.
Yeah.
I want to dance with somebody who loves me. So lyrical connections were really important to get her persona across. But going back with the French story, so I remember sitting very agitated in the French Areola, France, or whatever we were called then. And I remember thinking, okay, the album's been out in America. We've had 2 or 3 hits, and the French they won't even release it.
Yeah.
And we figured that she was going to get nominated for a Grammy,
mm-hmm.
Best New Artist. And I said to the head of the French company, I said, I think she's going to get a Grammy. She'll be the biggest artist coming out of America this year. I was just trying to shake him up.
Yeah.
And I said, and I'm going to get you a ticket for the Grammy. And if you can bring your top TV producer, I'll pay for the flights and hotels. And I'm thinking Clive's going to go crazy.
Yes, that's better work.
I did have my own budget, but that probably spent the budget for a year. And who's going to turn that down? And he was a music lover. So I think I don't know whether he came or his number 2, the head of international came, and they brought the lady who was running the biggest, she was the producer of the biggest Saturday night TV show in France. And they came to the Grammys and I sat with them. And I was desperately hoping Whitney would win Best New Artist. She did. And she won 6 others.
6
others.
My
She
God.
won. I think she won 7 that
This is
night.
with her first album.
First album.
Jeez.
And I remember the producer turned around to me as she'd come off stage, and she said to me, "I'll have her. When can I have her?"
Oh, you have it. I bet you will. Yeah.
And it's like, this is the dream. I can choose when. And the Grammys, as you know, is February. So I thought, France takes a while to break the market. So I thought, let's go for April.
Okay.
So it'll give us 3 months to really prepare.
Mm-hmm.
So we went for the first week of April. And if I tell you, I think it was April the 4th or 5th. If I tell you that on April the 4th or 5th, very few people in France had ever heard of Whitney Houston. She gets booked on this TV show, which was Grand Public. I think the show was called Grand Public, and the host was huge star called Michel Drucker. And it was a big show, Saturday nights. And he had one other guest on, who was the enfant terrible of France called Serge Gainsbourg.
Okay.
Now, Serge Gainsbourg is, how could I describe him? He was a film director of note, a writer of note, a hit songwriter of note, an artist of note, an enfant terrible of note. He was Mr. Culture or counterculture in France. Just great copy, great TV viewing, always controversial, never did anything conventionally, but he was an icon.
Yeah.
And so we knew the audience was going to be pretty huge, as it always was that Saturday for that show. So Whitney comes on and she sang Saving All My Love for You beautifully,
yeah.
comes down to sit next to Michel Drucker, the host, in between Michel Drucker and Serge Gainsbourg. And Serge Gainsbourg, and if you go to YouTube, you can see this clip. And I'm sitting in the wings watching this. And Michel Drucker, Serge Gainsbourg says, "Sublime, sublime." And he reaches for her hand and he says in French, "I want to fuck her."
Jesus. On TV, on live TV?
In French. Live TV.
Oh my God.
Michel Drucker, the host, basically says, "Pas du tout," not at all. He says he wants to give you flowers. And I remember, and you can see this clip.
Oh my God, that is unreal.
Wait for this. And Serge Gainsbourg goes like this to Michel Drucker and says, "Nah, don't stop me. You're not Reagan. I'm not Gorbachev. I can say what I like. I say I want to fuck her."
All in French, this is?
No, this is in English.
In English.
By now, it's in English. Now, what happened is that, as I said, he was patting Whitney's wrist.
And she's still what? She's still 17, 18?
She's
older.
18, 19.
18.
Yeah, we've taken 2 years to break the record and release it. I mean, people think an overnight sensation. It wasn't. So there is a millisecond where she is trying to remove his hand from her wrist. And that's the picture that everyone's got, the two of them holding hands. So the story, the next morning, if I tell you that if anyone didn't know who Whitney Houston was in France, by the next morning, they all did.
Wow.
And so when I say...
maybe the wrong reason.
For whatever reasons, but I was marketing.
I'll take it, yeah.
I'll take it.
Yeah, I'll take it.
And,
coverage, yeah.
And she became iconic in France as a record seller, went on every TV show, and the rest is history. But, never underestimate the power of luck. And then you have to turn it to your advantage. The other thing you referred to, which, again, who'd have thought? So one of the first meetings in my first week in New York, would I go to Columbia Pictures for a meeting? They're working on a movie, and that's all I know. Well, even in those days, I always loved the fact that there are film companies, record broadcasters, TV shows, all using music. So why aren't we forging partnerships? That's where I started, and it wasn't really happening much. It was by luck. Were we on a playlist? Could we get on a TV show? And if we didn't, what next? We made a record. Who's going to hear it? So I loved the idea of going to Columbia Pictures. What's this all about? And what it was all about was they were working on a movie which was a sort of comedic, cartoonesque movie. And they wanted, and I'm thinking, oh, great, we'll get the theme song. Oh, no. And the funny thing is, in the 80s, there were very few movies that had theme songs. There were few Phil Collins.
Like originally scored.
It was just
in general.
Yeah. They just didn't have, in the 70s, we remember, from Grease and Saturday Night Fever and millions, the song was leading the campaign. In the 80s, it was really weird. And it only really started again at the end of the 80s, the beginning of the 90s with Pretty Woman, when they put lots of songs, new songs in. But in the 80s, it wasn't. And I'm there, the new kid on the block, and my British optimism. Oh, great, this is Columbia Pictures. What's the movie? So they tell me all about the movie, and they say, there's a scene 20 minutes in that needs 35 seconds of music. And my heart sort of drops, and so I say, well, what's that 30 seconds got to say? And they say, well, it's got to sum up the whole story of the movie. And me being me, I say, well, wouldn't you want that as the theme song? No, we don't need a theme song. And I'm thinking, when you know the power of music, these are senior executives in the film business, and the penny hasn't dropped that I would never say to anyone, you should be doing this. But when I see what they are doing and knowing how music could amplify it, I'm like a dog with a bone. And I'm saying to them, and I don't think they're used to this British, it was very corporate America, but I didn't know any other, we don't know any other way. We are like this. And I remember thinking to myself, well, even if we do 35 seconds, I'm going to do a minute version as well, whatever this is going to be. And it ended up being Ghostbusters. And I mean, the story's great because they'd actually given us a U-matic video of the scene, and the U-matic had a piece of music on it, which they'd synced in, which was Huey Lewis' song called I Want a New Drug.
Right.
And we had an artist in California who wasn't really doing anything, but you just knew every 3 or 4 years he'd come up with a little pop gem
something, yeah,
called Ray Parker Jr. So Ray's the perfect person. Clive gets Ray involved, which was perfect. And he writes, who are you going to call Ghostbusters? And then the battle commences. How do we get this 1-minute piece to be the theme song? And eventually it was like saying to Columbia Pictures, we can save you £10 million of your marketing budget. Let the song come out first. Yeah. And in America, in those days, the big new movie would come out, say, July the 4th weekend. Mm-hmm. And for us, it would Christmas. So we'd have 6 months to wait.
Yeah.
But the buzz was already, anything on the streets in New York, we'd know about. So as soon as the buzz was created, with Ghostbusters being as huge as it was, I was getting all my labels in Holland or Germany or Brazil or Australia or Sweden or the UK saying, what's this song Ghostbusters? Can we release it? And that's manna from heaven. Can we release it? Yeah. We think we've got a hit.
Yeah.
And then the battle commenced. Please, can we release it? And we released it twice, and it sold 1 million twice before the movie, which proved the point that it did pre-sell their movie.
Yeah. Unbelievable. And that's all in your
first week.
So that's 1 week in New York. What about week 2? So you've already...
I think I might have gone off on a holiday. No, I mean, it was just, I'm like a kid in a candy store because, meeting the artists, having some sort of, when you're based in London, far away from who's making the records, and working with Clive and being allowed as head of international to interact with the artists. Yeah. This wasn't an ego trip for me. This is know your product. This is how can we... And I remember Billboard magazine, after a few weeks, they asked me to write the leader that week. Mm-hmm. And I remember, I think I called it, there's a big new world out there. American artists should open their eyes. And it was really saying to the managers that I was dealing with, mm-hmm. I know you think doing Boston, doing Chicago, doing San Francisco is your promotion. But can you think of Holland, Germany, France, Spain, Italy, Scandinavia? And, Whitney and her aunt, Dion, we had a big record with Heartbreaker. Dion Warwick.
Yeah.
And Dion, because the Bee Gees were huge and Barry Gibb was huge and he'd just done records for Streisand and this. And when we had Heartbreaker with Dion, which I just adored as the songs and the song craftsmanship, I mean, I think the Bee Gees, eternal songs.
Yeah.
And having an artist like Dion, who wasn't a songwriter, great, same as Whitney, not a songwriter, so you can find the best songs in the world. And we would do that, led by Clive. And when Heartbreaker came out, and I don't think it was that huge in America, but Dion was, I had a great relationship with her and her manager, and we schlepped around Europe and we had hit after hit after hit off this album. And it was great because she could translate that to Whitney's. And Dion was fantastic for me because I got to know Whitney's family very, very well. And through Whitney's family, I got to know Aretha very well. And that's a great story. Meeting Aretha.
I don't need to say anything. I can just let you go. This is brilliant.
Well, as I think about it, I mean,
it's amazing. I feel some of these stories I've heard, some of them I've not. But honestly, I'm gonna shut up again because I just want you to keep telling me.
You know what's great is, and I don't know if it is an old geezer, if I really believe this, but I do believe it. I honestly think we were living in the most enchanted time for music because that music and these artists have endured. So being the fortunate, a child of the 80s or whatever we were, this music really was, it was what carried me through. Mm-hmm. It wasn't as fashion orientated, and I hate to sort of knock today's music. It's a different vibe. And, I have 2 daughters who are very into what's happening today, and I get it, but it's a different vibe. I think music in my era was built to last. And when you look at the acts that have lasted and the songs that have lasted, I think today the artists are utterly iconic. If you think of the Taylor Swifts and the Sabrina Carpenters and so many of the others, obviously Coldplay. But a special mention for Coldplay, and I can justify that one, talking about eternal songs. And have you ever seen Coldplay? Like you and I like
live, yes, I saw them. It's still one of the best things. Not that they're one of my favorite bands. I do love them, but they're not one of my favorites. But they are. When I saw them headline Glastonbury in 2016, I want to say, or 2016, 17, it was one of the best things I've ever seen.
Akin to watching Liverpool winning, or for me, watching Wednesday win anything.
Yeah, anything. But
it is. It's community singing. It's bringing communities together. And that really informs what we're all doing today. It's all about communities. Cut out the middleman. We don't have record shops. We have to get direct to the audience. So it's all links rather beautifully.
Yeah, I just what you said there about I have this conversation quite a lot, and I talk about it quite a lot in terms of the creation of timeless artists, right? You know, you look at, I do believe we're well past, you know, you were kind of operating very much within, you know, a broadly speaking golden age of pop culture, if you like, between the kind of 60s, but 70s to 90s, you know, across those periods, there was, you know, some of the most timeless. It's a huge range of timeless artists that will stand the test of time. They are both the artist and their music. If you compare, you know, the 50s to the noughties, if you like, and then everything since then, you know, you think you could probably reel off 60, 70, 80 to maybe 100 artists who will stand the test of time.
Yeah.
Then you think about the noughties, you know, 2000 to where we are now, maybe 10. Maybe 15 if you really kind of count it. Like, we will never, music, the shelf life, social media has a big part to play in this, which is something we'll talk about in a bit, but you know, the shelf life of artists is so significantly less now than it was previously. We don't have the same time to dedicate people. The audiences don't digest music and digest artists or follow artists in the same ways. They might follow them in the way they used to, but again, they move on to the next one very, very quickly. So,
I think that's exactly the point. I think since the 70s, music has been very fashion-led. So you think of punk and you think of new wave and you think of glam and you think of grunge. It's been hand in glove with fashion. And fashion changes, it evolves, and why shouldn't it? And I think my observation, and many people might agree or disagree, I think we've been not a slave to, but I think music has been so linked to lifestyle and fashion. And I'm not saying it wasn't in the 60s with flower power and the 70s, I always think, with singer-songwriters and guitar rock. You know, when you think of Floyd and you think of Led Zeppelin, you think of the birth of rock, really the seminal time. And singer-songwriters, you know, storytelling. You know, we think of Ed Sheeran and we think of, in this day and age, Capaldi,
Adele.
Sam Felder, Adele.
Yeah.
You know, it hasn't gone away, but it's not as prominent as it was, I think, originated then.
Mm-hmm.
And that originated from the 60s, from the poets, you know, Bob Dylan, Joni Mitchell, Judy Collins, Leonard Cohen. They were the poets first and then songwriters.
Yeah. I want you to go back to tell me the Aretha story, because I cut you off there and we pivoted away from that, but I want to hear that Aretha story.
So the great thing about telling these stories is what I'm doing today is as a direct result of, and we'll talk about it later, but we're doing a musical at the moment.
Yep.
And the musical is, I won't give the title away because we've workshopped it and we're doing great.
Okay.
And these things take an age, but it's completely based on my time with Aretha, Tina Turner and Whitney, the three generations.
Small names.
Small names.
Small time artist.
That completely transformed.
It's unbelievable. Just that in itself, just as a short little anecdote.
Yeah, as I say it,
insane.
I know it is
it's
insane.
Just insane. But do you? Sorry to pivot here. Do you sometimes, you know? Listen, we always talk about things like this. You tell the stories. I'm sure you know. You will come up in conversations a lot when you're working within work, etc. Do you ever pinch yourself a little bit and just go, "Fuck, some of the names, some of the artists, and the songs and the moments that you've been involved in. These are like some of the most important moments in artists
But
who have
Josh,
shaped
you know what? If we
popular music.
if we were lawyers or accountants, we don't get gold discs for doing the deal as a lawyer for the next piece of property or the next whatever it might be. Our business is all about glory and being seen to be popular and famous and whatever. So we get the reflected glory of working with these people. I like to think we've contributed, and I can think of many cases when without the record company, without the executive in the record company that made that decision on that song, the artist would still be floundering. And that's why I come back to that definition of never underestimate the power of luck. I was a cog in a wheel.
You never know. If you'd gone to a different restaurant that first week in New She might still be singing in some supper club.
Well, but and I always think, when people are responsible for signing an artist, the same person, whether it's me working with an artist, we've also passed on artists that have become huge. Maybe not with the same songs that we were offered, but I do sometimes pinch myself, but that was I wasn't a lawyer, and I wasn't an accountant, and I wasn't an architect, and I wasn't a doctor. These people are doing much more important jobs than us.
Mm-hmm.
We just get the reflected glory of it, and it's a byproduct of. And I'm thinking I'm not generally accused of modesty, but is this false modesty? I don't think it is. I think you make the best of what you've got.
For sure, yeah.
And I remember.
Listen, you don't know it when you're sitting there at the time. It's now, it's in hindsight. You can look back on these things, and as you're telling these stories, and I can imagine you sometimes check it. But at the moment when you're sitting in there and you're looking at that 16-year-old Whitney Houston singing on stage, and we got to sign her, and you saying, you would never sit there and dream, and you would never have known at that point that she's going to be one of the greatest artists in the history of pop music. You're just never going to know it, and it has a lot to do with the luck, but it's the foresight and. It's I get it. It's not about the credit, like wanting the what's the word I'm thinking of, the title or the credibility or the recognition of being but it's the knowledge of just having been involved in that project,
and that's the word, involved. So every person, every one of my colleagues, or the manager of the act and the songwriter. Everyone's contributed to making this all come together. And it's a bit like Harry Kane. What about...
Where's this analogy?
Well, football.
Go on.
The fullback that made the dart down the flank and crossed the ball doesn't get the credit. Harry gets the credit. And the midfielder who crunched the tackle that won the ball back, and the keeper who made 3 miraculous saves before that, it's the Harry Kane that gets the plaudits.
I see where you went there. Okay.
And but the Aretha story is lovely, because I remember meeting her, and it was because of Whitney's mother, Sissy. We were having dinner, I think it was, and I was desperate because Whitney had travelled and Dion had travelled, and Dion, Aretha, and Whitney were all very close to Sissy,
right?
Whitney's mother, Sissy. And I remember desperately, everyone in the company was trying to get Aretha to travel. She wouldn't get on a plane. She wouldn't come to New York. She lived in Detroit, but Detroit, as she called it.
It's like what's her face from Keeping Up Appearances?
Yes, exactly. And we'd got a hit record with, I think it was Freeway to Love. Narada Michael Walden, who was a great writer producer and wrote, definitely produced How Will I Know for Whitney,
right?
And I'm pretty sure produced I Want to Dance with Somebody. And he did 3 tracks on the first Whitney album, and he did the pop dance tracks. He was a drummer, great writer, and great sense of melody as well. And he had produced Aretha's first record on Arista that became a hit single, which was Freeway of Love. And I was thinking, it's a hit in America. I think we had a hit in the UK with it. I'm going to make sure we have a gold disc from somewhere. And through Sissy and Clive, they got me to go to Détroit to go and sit with Aretha.
I think Eminem calls it that as well.
Probably not. It's funny how these things stick with you. She did. She referred to it as Détroit. And they got me to go and present her with a gold disc.
Okay.
For sales somewhere, I think probably the UK, just to say, can you get on a plane? Will you get on the boat? Will you travel? Will you come and do promotion? And so I get there, two of us went, and we get there and she's playing in a supper club. I would call it a sort of chicken and chips place.
Okay.
Where it's people watching, having chicken and chips and watching. It's a bit of a cabaret place.
Right.
And it's Aretha, the Queen of Soul. And she's like dialing it in. And it's just, I just thought, this is the legend that, I mean, I've always loved a great voice, you know, and I've been very fortunate to work with some of these people. But you listen to that voice and it does things to
legendary,
us.
Yeah.
And I'm watching her going through the motions in a supper club, in a chicken in a basket place. And anyway, I've been told, go to the back, go to the stage door at the end with your gold disc and you'll meet the manager and he'll take you in. And I got on very well with the manager. I'd never met him. It was a guy called, well, I won't tell you. It might be incriminating. And
okay.
And so I get to the two of us get to the stage door, and for an hour we're waiting there, and we just see people coming in and going out, coming in and going out, coming in and going out, hundreds of them. And it's like, we are from the record company. We've flown in from New York. I think it was very cold, and we're just outside shivering. We're executives. Anyway, we found out why. It's the feeding of the 5,000. We go into this anteroom. We're ushered in after an hour, and Aretha's got, must have been her whole village, her whole family. They're all sitting there eating chicken in a basket. It's obviously, that's the priority. Feed the family, feed the friends, and record company people can wait.
Yeah.
We then get ushered in.
Rightly so.
Rightly so. And then we get ushered into her dressing room. And I'm not overawed by many people, but she was a presence.
Mm-hmm.
But what then happened, you cannot write. I'm talking, and I can talk, and I'm thinking, is any of this going in? You know, I'm sort of saying, you've had a big hit in England, or if you only could come and play in Holland or whatever. And as I'm talking to her, she wanders, there's a little keyboard there, and she's talking, but she's playing. And even then, I'm thinking, we didn't have phones. I'm thinking, if no one would believe this, Aretha is playing the piano and singing at me.
Is she singing? I don't know. Is she singing? Is she responding? Is she engaging in the conversation? But she's just singing her response.
I don't know. It's like most of it's going over my head. I really don't know. I'm just sitting in Aretha's dressing room, and she's playing whatever she's playing, and you know, half of you's thinking, stop being the record company person. Just immerse yourself in this moment. Yeah. And then the other thing is, you're an executive with the record company. You're here on a mission. You've got to do something here. Anyway, long story short, we got her to come to London. We got her to travel. The album was huge. She then did a duet with Annie Lennox. We then did another song, which was unbelievable. If you see the video, which she wouldn't travel and promote. The song was called Another Night. And if you ever want to see how an artist with a voice and an attitude delivers a song, it was that. It was, if you think that I'm a pushover. And the video, I mean, I was on the set. It's just an object lesson in how to interpret a song and showcase that to an audience and bring the song alive, which has always been my definition of a good video or a good performance. It makes the song sound better. And no one did that better than her. Long story, but
it's worth it. It was worth the tell. It's already, we've been talking for 40, 50 minutes almost now, and I mean the scale of we've not even got halfway through. We've not even scratched the surface really. But I mean, some of the stuff you've been involved in, some of the artists, the careers, the journeys that you've been involved in, like we said, it's that involvement it is just mind blowing. It really is just mind blowing. We kind of pivoted away from what we were talking about. We kind of touched on the musical and how it's based around Aretha, Whitney, and Tina. We will go back to that, but there are a couple other things I wanted to talk about because we still some more bits we want to get through here. I guess two areas that we've not touched on yet, and I guess this is kind of the next iteration of where you moved in the career. One, I guess, is around your involvement with classical artists and kind of bringing that through into the mainstream and how that crossed over with, from Opportunity Knocks coming up to your involvement with things like Britain's Got Talent and X Factor and working with Simon Cowell. So I want to touch on that. And then also how you kind of evolved, I guess, into the brand partnership, sports space, the setup of the music and media partnership company. But let's start with the classical stuff. How did that kind of pivot towards that? Obviously, being so involved in pop and mostly pop and soul and that kind of crossover sound, and then a direction towards the classical genres.
That's an interesting question. I would date it all back without doubt. Again, it's one piece. I mean, I just love melodies.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's the Beatles or Coldplay or whoever's around, give me a great tune. And when I was doing international A&R in London for Arista, Areola as it then was, a record crossed my desk that had been a hit in Holland. And it was always like, well, if it's been a hit in Holland, the Dutch want you to release it in England.
Yeah.
And it was a song called Midnight Blue by a soprano called Louise Tucker. And as I said before, artists come and go, but songs live forever. And I heard that song, and the tune is based on a piece of Beethoven.
Right.
It's the Pathétique. Did I know that? But I knew the tune. And I guess that's my knowledge of music is if I know the tune, whether it's Mozart or Beethoven, and I'm no different from most other people. These tunes have lasted 200-300 years. And if they have, there's obviously something about them. Anyway, this song, Midnight Blue, was based on this piece of Beethoven. But what a gorgeous piece of music. 3 minutes, and it was becoming a big hit in Holland. And then we sort of spread it to France. It became number one in France, and it was called Midnight Blue. And I met with the guys who wrote and produced it, or adapted the Beethoven into it, made a pop song into it, which Barry Manilow had done with Could It Be Magic? And Eric Carmen, also on Arista, had done with All By Myself, Rachmaninoff and etc. And so I always loved a great tune. And these composers, I didn't know who they were. And I met with these two guys, Tim Smith and Charlie Scarbeck. Tim Smith is responsible for the place in what's the Gardens? The Gardens of Helicon, the Eden Project.
Okay, yeah.
Tim's brainchild was the Eden Project. So he went from producing and writing songs, and I got him to produce Barry Manilow as well.
Right.
And Charlie became my favorite go-to producer. And when I subsequently left Arista, I came back to London to run EMI International for 2 years. And I sort of lost my love for record company life. Working with, the likes of Tina and McCartney, you'd think it'd be phenomenal.
God, you've just dropped it. McCartney's, I've not had that story before, so we'll have to go back to that one.
I've got a lovely Linda story, but I won't.
Yeah, no, I want to. I need to try and stop taking you off course.
but EMI was this huge. Arista was this family company, and everything we released had to work. We had to lovingly craft it. And if track one wasn't a single, track two, and Clive was the master of, if you're going to make an album of singles.
Yeah.
And, Whitney's first album, probably 8 singles. The second one, probably 8 or 9 singles.
Mm-hmm.
Why should there be such a thing as an album track?
Yeah.
Let's have 3-minute nuggets. And I remember going to EMI and being so disappointed that certain songs, they just weren't priority artists.
Yeah.
So the songs never came through. And my first week, I'd heard a record that was released in America, and I was so excited that I was going to inherit it as head of international. And nobody in the company, it wasn't even on the release schedule.
Wow.
And it was Bobby McFerrin, Don't Worry, Be Happy.
Yeah.
And I just remember taking it by the horns and talk to everyone in the company. We've got to promote this record. This is a hit, whoever Bobby McFerrin is. And it sort of taught me, and it did become a big hit, and the UK reluctantly did release it.
Yep.
And it was like no one's priority. And we had a few of those. And I thought, why am I having to force feed this?
Mm-hmm.
This should be coming from the top, and I just sort of fell out of love with being in a big company. And I always thought, I've always wanted the safety net. I've always wanted songs to have an artist to have a safety net. So whether it's a TV show or a playlist or a brand or a film company or whatever, because in those days, if you don't go on the Radio 1 playlist or Capital, no one was going to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought one day I'm going to have a company and I'm going to call it the Music and Media Partnership. And I left EMI at the end of my contract. It was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm not built for corporate life anymore, and corporate life is not built for me. And one of my oldest and dearest friends was he was the head of media at BBDO, one of the big ad agencies. And his name's Robert Dodds, another great mentor to me and a great friend. And Robert was running the Pepsi account at BBDO and was very responsible for Pepsi getting into owner-funded, brand-owned content.
Right.
TV, radio, and with us, music. And so Rob and he decided to leave BBDO and set up. So we set up an office, the two of us with his secretary, in 1990, I think it was.
Right.
In an office, secretary, no business, but we were so excited. And we had one client, potential client, Pepsi. Robert, I had nobody apart from my contacts. And our second day of business, January the 3rd or whatever it was, we had a meeting with Pepsi, his ex-clients.
Yeah.
And it was really to hear from Pepsi, what were they doing in music and how could we help? And Robert was incredibly innovative. He'd created for Pepsi the first ever brand owned television program, which was a Friday night show called Passengers, for the launch of Pepsi Max, which was all sort of extreme sports and lesbian bikers on acid and whatever it was.
Right, okay.
That was the Pepsi Max brand, and that was TV, Channel 4, Friday night, 11 o'clock. And then he did the same, this to me is genius, with the Pepsi network chart. By then we had 150 commercial radio stations, but we had one chart, the BBC chart.
Yeah.
And Rob reasoned, why don't these other 150 stations have their own independent chart?
Mm-hmm.
And Pepsi paid for it, owned it, sold it, and it became the brand leader, if you like, in music.
Okay.
So we have our first meeting with Pepsi, and we're so excited for about 10 minutes. And these Pepsi suits come in, and we're full of vim and vigor and new year and new start, new beginning. And these Pepsi suits come in, browbeaten, looking like they haven't had a day off. And it's like, what's going on?
Mm.
What's gone on is they were going to sponsor the Stones' Steel Wheels tour,
right?
Which was, pretty iconic.
Mm-hmm.
And the Stones, apparently the deal had fallen through over Christmas and the New Year. And I heard myself say, well, that's great. Looking for land of opportunity,
Yes,
can we come up?
You've got a budget to spend.
You've got a budget, but you've got there's a brief. What do and they're going, no, we think you're pulling out of music. This has really hit us hard.
Right.
How can you replace the Rolling Stones? And all I can think of is, I know I talk a lot, but I do listen. And I'd had a bit of an education from Robert in Pepsi, in that the bottling plant, the retailers, they were all part of the universe of Pepsi, the Pepsi brand. It wasn't just the consumer. It was, how do you get to the consumer? You have to go through retail. You have to go through distribution. You have to go through the bottling plant, which was a separate company. And you have to schmooze as Pepsi to get it stocked.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, you know, and I remember that the campaign theme in those days was the choice of a new generation. And I'm thinking the Rolling Stones.
Well, that was the tagline, the Pepsi
That was the tagline. And I remember saying, you know, I've just come from working in record companies. There are artists that would bite your hand off for what you can offer. Because you can offer airtime, you can offer retail presence, you can offer brand experience. It all can amplify if you're willing and interested to use the music. They said, use it, we'd have to pay a fortune. I said, not if the artist thinks that it's, and the record company thinks that it's a win-win.
Yeah.
And I can think of several acts that I've worked with who you need an act that's touring. I get that because you want to play Australia, you want to play South America, you want to play Europe, and you want the dealers and the retailers to be able to do a meet and greet backstage.
Mm-hmm.
Jagger is not going to do a meet and greet backstage. But if I take the brief, you know, who is your demographic? And, you know, I remember to this day, you know, their strapline of the choice of a new generation. That wasn't the issue. The issue is they had to get the dealers on the stockists, the retailers, the bottling plant, these guys, mostly men and women, of 30 to 50. So the demographic had to fit whoever the music act was or the music. And I remember saying, you know, the one thing that you can do, again, driven by my love of song, the one thing that you can do that no one's really done in the brand space, and let's look at Coke, since eternity, is create a song that only exists because it's in your commercial and you've created it. And Coke did lead the way with I'd Like to Teach the World to Sing, if you remember that, which was the first written for a commercial. I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony.
Oh yes, okay, I do know that. I've heard.
And it became a hit record and a group and this, that, and the other. And then pretty much nothing for years. Levi's were big in the 80s, choosing rock music as their sound bed, but I don't think there were many that were written for the commercial or chosen for the commercial. And I remember thinking, God, if I was sitting in an A&R meeting at EMI, thinking, who have we got and what are we looking for a big song? And I'm thinking, well, Tina. She tours the world. Everyone loves her. She crosses every demographic. And there's a song that I remember wanting Whitney to do and didn't do, wanting so many artists to do and they wouldn't do it. It was one of my favorite songs from the 70s called It Takes Two.
Yeah.
And I got so excited with my thinking where this Pepsi thing could go. At the end of the meeting, and I said, you know, you could come up with a song. We could bring the artist in from a major label. It wouldn't cost you a fortune. It'd be a marriage made in heaven if we choose the right artist, the right song, and you're willing to share your real estate of TV airtime, so we get the commercial, etc., and put the video together like it's the commercial, and so I can see it all in my head. They walk out, they say, well, let's have another meeting on Friday, come down to our office and present. So this was a Tuesday, we had 3 days. They walk out, Robert looks at me and goes, I hope you know what you're doing. You know, this is my client you're playing with. And I said, Rob, I actually think I do. So he said, what? I said, well, their other subtext to their commercial or to their brief is you and your Pepsi are lifestyle companions, you know, doing homework, you and your Pepsi, go to the movies, you and your Pepsi. And I'm thinking, it takes two, you and your Pepsi.
Right.
And Tina is a pop singer. It's a pop song, originally a Motown song, so has a black pedigree.
Yeah.
She's a black artist, but sings predominantly for white audiences. This could be great. And Robert says to me, looks across the table. I mean, literally 10 minutes later, he said, oh, I was thinking Rod Stewart. And we went, hang on, Rod's white, but sings black. Tina's black, but sings white. It takes two. So I knew both managers. This was a Tuesday, Josh. By the Wednesday and Thursday, I contacted both artists, both managers with the idea. On the Friday, we go to Pepsi down in Richmond and we've storyboarded the whole thing. And to this day,
unreal.
we ticked we weren't reinventing the world. We were ticking boxes.
Yeah.
And as I always say, we're not looking to change what you do. We're looking to amplify.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty much everything we proposed, that was the next year's campaign for Pepsi.
Unreal.
And that was my first forage into brand partnership, where it becomes a really organic partnership rather than let's look at the brand and all the money they've spent.
And was that so that collaboration must have been, did that kind of kickstart a whole new brand music alliance or allegiance partnership crossover
100%,
journey going forward?
100%. And it wasn't looking at necessarily let's do a Me Too with the next Pepsi or the next, I've always wanted to innovate, always wanted to do something a little bit different. And I then sort of created something called the branded album. And the branded album, to me, it was not rocket science. Compilations were out selling everything at the time. So you'd have a dance compilation or a ballads compilation. And the album cover was fantastic real estate. In every record store, album displays, it was always the cover.
Yeah.
When you had a compilation album, it was a blank canvas.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, there has to be a link between a brand and its visual identity and its theme and what an album cover could be. And one of the first we did, I remember, was we did Doc Martens, and Britpop was coming through. And we did the first Britpop compilation, and it was called Unlaced.
Right.
And all the imagery was Doc Martens imagery. We got stocked in every Doc Martens store, and every record store took some shoes or whatever. It was just the greatest pollination of, and it sold the album. But I think we must have had 20 branded albums in the 90s, from Love compilations, The Lady Milktray. Their copy line was all because the lady loves. The album, The Lady Loves, with Sade,
Right.
Michael Bolton, Terence Trent D'Arby. And we created, 15 or 20, and they all were top 10 albums. I remember we launched for Polo mints. They did the mini mint, and we put a little mini mint in the spine of the CD.
Oh yeah, right in the wee cove.
Yeah.
In the turn. Yeah.
In the spine. And we called the album Cool Grooves.
Yeah.
And the whole campaign for Polo was Cool Grooves. We did so many. I think my favorite one of all, which didn't happen, but the best one of all, is in a pub in Soho. I'm standing at the bar and there's a big Chelsea fan standing and we're talking football.
Yeah.
And then I say, what do you do? He said, I'm creative director at BBH, which was one of the big ad agencies. And I said, what brands have you got? And he said, I've got Holsten.
Right.
And Holsten were then sponsoring comedy, the comedy festival. They were, and all their ads were comedic.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to him, and we talked, and the next day, I think Wednesday, we were playing Chelsea, and we met up for a drink afterwards, and we got on like a house on fire. Jay, his name was, Jay Pond Jones, absolute legend. And I said to him, why don't we do and he loved the fact that I was in the music business. I said, why don't we do the first comedy's greatest hits? And they were running, I haven't thought about this for years, they were running a campaign that was all anagrams.
Right.
Spot ill hens, which was Holsten pills.
Okay. Yeah.
Every possible anagram of Holsten pills became their adverts.
Right.
And I remember looking at it one day and thinking, Noel's Hits LP, Noel being Christmas.
Yeah.
Let's put a compilation out for Christmas. What a gift. Noel's Hits LP, which is an anagram of Holsten pills. So we got no one had ever tried to license comedy. Not an easy thing to do. So we got all the best Billy Connolly, Smith and Jones, Monty Python, Rowan Atkinson, all the comedy of the day.
Wow.
And Noel's Hits LP. And it was done in the same graphics as everything. And the brand, I'll never forget, the brand manager comes into the record company and we're sitting around the table and he said, do you want the good news or the bad news? And we're going, and this is like 2 weeks before release, and we got 100,000 orders. And he says, we have a history in this company of giving the trade the best Christmas present of any other bottled beer or...
Yeah.
And our owner, our boss, thinks that no else hits LP. It should be exclusive to our 20,000 retailers,
Right.
or pub owners.
Yeah.
And we're going, well, that's great. And he said, no, exclusive, meaning we're not going to let it go to the public. So
No way.
it didn't go to the public, but 20,000 went to the trade.
No
But
way.
to this day, it was the best mirror. And then that led on to the sports,
Do you get a copy of it at least?
I probably do actually at home. And it was exactly the yellow and green of
Wow.
the Holsten at the time.
Crazy.
But that led on a little bit earlier to broadcast, sport. We love sport.
Yeah.
Sport gives us a huge audience. And it all started, again, luck. I'm trying to watch my beloved Sheffield Wednesday play in a Rumbelows Cup match in 1991, actually 1990. It's a happy ending because we won the Rumbelows Cup that year, beating Man United in the final. Last cup we won. But I couldn't go to Hillsborough to watch us play whatever round it was. And something gave me the chutzpah to call ITV, who had midweek football special.
Yeah.
I got through to a secretary in the sports department and I gave her some sob story that I can't get there because I'm ill, but could I come in and watch the Sheffield Wednesday game because I know you're filming it tonight.
Right.
And there is a God. She says, yes, come in and watch it. And I'm ushered into the room of the head of sport at ITV, a guy called Trevor East.
Okay.
And I'm sitting with Trevor and we're chatting, and he's a Derby director. So we're talking Wednesday and Derby, and we're watching Wednesday play. And on his desk, by pure fluke, I notice at halftime is a deck which says Rugby World Cup 91.
Okay.
Now, this conversation is happening in 1990, like end of the year 1990. And I said, oh, what's this? And he said, oh, I said, no, it sounds really Rugby World Cup. I didn't know there was such a thing. He said, well, there's been one before in New Zealand, but no one knew it happened, or Australia, New Zealand, I think. But we've got the rights to it. And I said, well, that's exciting, because I used to love watching England play rugby. And he said, not really, because we don't have any audience for rugby. The BBC have 5 Nations, as it then was. And so we get talking about it, and he's not in the slightest bit interested, but I am. So I'm dragging it out of him, thinking there must be something in this for us.
Yeah.
Sport and music, there'll be a theme song or whatever.
Yeah.
And to cut a very long story short.
Reminds me of, the skit in Little Britain. So write the theme tune, sing the
Yeah,
theme
exactly. Exactly.
There must be a theme tune.
There must be a theme tune. And the more excited I'm getting, the less excited Trevor's getting. And he said, not only do we not have an audience, but the IBA, the International Independent Broadcasting Authority, has decreed that we have to be the first sport event to take a broadcast sponsor. How are we going to get a sponsor when there's no audience? And I remember saying, well, you need a thumping great theme tune. Which is where I went wrong.
The answer to everything.
The answer to everything. And I remember, I lost him at Thumping Great because he turned around to me and he said, no, we don't need a Thumping Great theme tune and he told me the whole thing about the Rugby World Cup was going to be aimed at national pageantry, the female of the household. And it's because I was thinking, football's for wimps, rugby's for, we just had Ness and Dormer and he'll want some raucous rock and roll. And I'd mentioned Charlie Scarbeck, who was I teamed up with him as my producer. So whenever we needed to produce new music, Charlie and I did it together. And he was a genius with tunes and melody. And I said to Charlie, next round, Wednesday you're playing Derby in the next round, you've got to come with me to Trevor's office at ITV. We've got to convince him that we're going to do the theme song.
Okay.
And when Trevor reiterated national pageantry, female of the household, the biggest event since the royal wedding, Charlie and I went away and we looked at each other and said, I vow to thee my country, which is the hymn, comes from the Jupiter Suite, going back to classical music. So this is 1990-91.
Yeah.
And Charlie, who brought the world Midnight Blue, the Beethoven.
Yeah.
Here we are 7 or 8 years later, and we're talking about the Jupiter Suite from the Planets that we knew as I Vow to Thee My Country. we rewrote it as the world in union, and it became ITV's theme tune to the World Cup. And then it became the first, before the Champions League, the first global sports event to have enshrined in the contracts the official theme song.
Right.
Because IMG came to us after the ITV one and said, it's worked so well in the UK. And we got Dame Kiri Te Kanawa, who'd have thought, an opera singer with a #1 record because of the airtime. And,
wow.
And I remember, the then head of Sony, I did the deal with Sony for the Rugby World Cup because Timbo and the chairman lived in, and the marketing director, Brian Yates, lived near Twickenham, and they were rugby fans.
Okay.
And I remember the marketing manager, who was a guy called Rob Stringer,
right,
who's now boss of Sony, and Rob was like the product manager, the A&R manager. And I remember them saying in a meeting when people were questioning, why would you get Dame Kiri Te Kanawa onto a pop record? And I remember they all said, they took the words out of my, and they said, let the audience decide. And, I'm thrilled to say that Pavarotti got to #2 with Nessun Dorma. We got to #1 with Dame Kiri, which then led me into Carreras. Beat Pavarotti.
With the rugby theme tune.
And then through the rugby, I then got to do the music for FIFA for the World Cup in '94, and then subsequent Rugby World Cups, subsequent World Cups, Euro '96 with Three Lions. And that's when the whole sports thing, it was like, oh my God, there's a whole audience waiting to be fed.
Without brushing over that too quickly, just tell us a little bit about the Three Lions one, because obviously I think, although you've done some, various different competitions, that's the one for much to the bane of my existence. So thanks very much for that as a Scot and as a Welshman, as anybody non-English really.
But it started, it got its life at England v Scotland when Gary McAllister missed a penalty.
I don't want to talk about it.
And Gazza, I have to tell you, and Gazza scored the wonder goal, because talking about the moment of luck that turned, I'll tell you the story. So I'd done the World Cup music for FIFA in '94 in America, and then go to the FA in '95. We were hosting the biggest event since the '66 World Cup, Euro '96. And I go in saying, you'll want a thumping great theme song. And I'm a bit of a one-trick pony. And to cut a long story short, and what would you call it, and what would it be? And sitting on the desk was a document. And it always starts with, I do take a brief.
Yeah, something caught my eye.
Something caught my eye, as it did with Trevor Rugby World Cup.
Yeah.
Oh, you're doing this, music can amplify it. And I'm sitting at the FA, and on the desk, there's a brochure with a Saatchi & Saatchi logo, Three Lions crest, and the copy line of the tournament, football comes home.
Right.
And I said, oh, so Saatchis have come in to present, have they? They said, yes, they're going to do a campaign. I said, that campaign is going to glorify why we're hosting Euro '96. And I thought, I've only got one chance. One of my other mottos in life is the worst two words in the English language are, if only. And I thought, if I can't walk out here not saying this. And I remember saying, we've got so many problems in football, you need the feel-good factor. We've got a shit England team. We've got Venables in court. We've got hooliganism on the terraces. We've got the players getting pissed and ticket irregularities at the FA, which led to the marketing director being fired. You need the feel-good factor. Oh, yeah, and what do you suggest? And I said, well, we've sort of given swing low to rugby. We did swing low for the RFU, taken swing low off the terraces. Why don't we try and create a national anthem of football? And I'm thinking on my feet, but I like that. It's like, okay, if you're going to set the bar, set the bar. And I remember saying, we all watch, a bit of reality check here. We all watch fantasy football on a Friday night, David Baddiel and Frank Skinner, for the real fan. That's the fans surely you're trying to reach. Not the glory seekers, but the real fan who, Frank's a West Brom fan, they win nothing. David's a Chelsea fan, they're in the Premiership, but think they should be bigger, etc., etc. And I left the meeting feeling I'm in with a shot here. And the first person I called was a guy called Brian Barwick. Now, Brian was then head of sport at BBC, head of football at the BBC.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, if I'm going to go for the official theme song, I've got to make sure that the BBC will play it. And Brian basically said, well, you know, the music we use for Goals of the Month is a song called Life of Riley by Lightning Seeds. And it's got the sound world works.
Yeah.
So I thought, this is great. I knew someone who knows Ian Brody.
Yeah.
I finally get through to Ian Brody.
Mm-hmm.
Ian's first words are, I don't want to front a football song.
Right.
And between the two of us, and my heart drops and then thinks, actually, that's great, because maybe there's Frank Skinner and David, I'm thinking at the back of my head, don't know how they could be involved. And Ian says, what about Frank Skinner and David Baddiel?
He said that without you prompting.
I'm thinking it, he says it, or I say it, and he's thinking it, or whatever. I want to give Ian the benefit of that, because I think it was him. And I contact Skinner and Baddiel, and they don't write tunes, but they write words.
Yeah.
He writes brilliant tunes.
Yeah.
That's how that came together. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is we recorded it on April the 1st. It took 3, and I bring the great Rob Stringer back into this because he was then head of A&R and head of Sony UK.
Yeah.
We couldn't make that record work. Frank Skinner used to call me the head of chief of police because I kept saying, you can't say that. Butcher bloodied by war. That was one of the lines. You can't say this, you can't say that. And for various reasons, that song from April the 1st, for another 3 weeks, Rob pulled rabbit out of a hat, changing the mixing engineer, making that song work. Frank and David and Ian, this was a team effort, and I was the guy from the FA sort of making sure we were going to deliver what we had to deliver.
Yeah.
We premiered that song in a pre-tournament friendly against Hungary on May the 19th. 0-0 draw against Hungary. The crowd were not interested at all. We then
alive. Was it them singing it live, or was it just backing?
We played it. A mate of mine was the DJ at Wembley.
Oh, he just played the song.
Played it. No one's interested. Then the tournament starts. Played it again. We drew with Switzerland, 1-1 or something. Just pitiful. Then we play Scotland the following week. I'm sorry, but this is the power of luck. Gary McAllister misses a penalty.
Yeah.
Gazza scores the wonder goal.
Yeah.
And at the end of the game,
he does the whole dentist share thing.
And he does all that. What comes on the screen, what comes on the sound system, 3 lines on a shirt, the whole crowd is singing it. And it was the DJ, Steve Kemsley, who I'm still in touch with to this day, who was responsible.
It's his fault. It's his fault.
Completely.
I'll have his address after.
And, but the funny thing was, at that time, we'd taken it to radio. Chris Evans was doing the Radio 1 breakfast show. Chris Tarrant was doing Capital. They weren't going to play it. They weren't interested. After that game, on the Monday morning, it was all over. Every station. On the Thursday or the Wednesday, the following Saturday, we play Holland, score 4, and the crowd, and I've got the video from that game, the whole stadium is singing 3 Lions. How did it happen?
That's the moment. So it's actually Gary McAllister's fault. If we want to take it,
I think Gazza. I think a lot of people.
An unbelievable transition. Then how brands, how you've I guess that movement again from pop. We were kind of going down the classical route, but we seem to have skipped over that. But we will touch on that very briefly because we're going to wrap up very shortly. But that move, you're kind of the transition into the brand space and how that then transitioned forward into the sports space. Insane. Similar to what we said before about the period of time you were involved in, discovering and working with some timeless artists. It was a similar kind of period, right? Brands weren't engaging with music and culture and celebrity in the way that they are now. And you were a key part of that journey, I guess, again, as we talked about journeys. And again, with sport, for us, as football fans or sport fans, theme music's the Champions League theme tune you talked about, 3 lines, much to my dismay, but, songs.
Well, you've got Flower of Scotland.
We've got Flower of Scotland. Do you remember, talked about this recently, do you remember what Scotland's the last time we are obviously going to be in the next World Cup, but the last World Cup we were in, France '98. Do you remember what the Scotland World Cup song was?
Not what's his name's Tartan Army.
No, it was no. That was Argentina. That was the previous one. But
That's right.
the actual Scotland World Cup song was Milktray.
Oh, I worked on that.
Don't come home.
Don't come home too soon. It's so funny thinking.
I love it. You're involved in that one as well. I love you gave England football's coming home, and you gave Scotland don't come home.
I remember that very well, and that led to my dear friend Omid Jalili, the comedian. Yeah. Omid and I were talking before a World Cup a few years ago, and he came up with the greatest title for a song, which we did, and it's the greatest video we had from Michael McIntyre to everyone we could get to. Omid got to. And made the video of this song, which was called England's Going Out, in brackets, to Do It Again. So, but what I like to think is that everything is evolution. You can't stand still. You have to see that there's another opportunity and it's the next thing. But the one thing that links it all to today is I'm always driven by an audience.
Yeah.
And if I can find an audience, and whilst we all decry the fact that we have no record shops and people of my age, we made records to get into record shops that people would buy. Now it's direct to consumer. It's through social media.
Yep.
It's direct to audiences. So I've always loved the fact that, you talk about the classical thing. I've always loved a big voice. And we had a big hit for for the World Cup in France '98. I got this unknown South American, or actually Puerto Rican, and we put a song together called The Cup of Life. I did it with Desmond Child, big songwriter, with this unknown artist called Ricky Martin. We sell millions and millions of records. And in my contract with FIFA and the FA, I'm executive producer. I'm not allowed to earn from royalties or anything. I got a very nice fee. And I'm going crazy because the more this record sells, everyone's saying, oh, you must be making a fortune. No. My wife says to me, go and find your own artist. And I thought, you know what? Easy. Isn't everyone trying to do that? But I wanted to find an artist who had the voice, the presence, that I could roll onto the pitch to sing the national anthem or Abide With Me or Jerusalem or whatever it is, because no one else was doing it. Mm-hmm. And I found Russell Watson. And Russell,
everyone's just name after name.
Before we got a record deal, Russell, I got him doing Swing Low for 1999 for the Rugby World Cup. And then we made a record, and then he's doing the national anthem. And I remember John Motson or Desmond Lynam saying England are playing Germany, I think, at Wembley. And he said, but here's Russell Watson. He's played Wembley more times than Michael Owen. And that was, I'm going to start finding artists. And that's when I started through the 2000s finding artists, and I'm thrilled to say selling an awful lot of records. But what that morphed into is the audience are coming to see these guys live. I want a piece of live. So we were making so much more money through live concerts of these artists. And I found a classical violinist. I didn't want him to play classical. I wanted him to play Metallica or Havana Gila or Coldplay or whatever.
It's quite a repertoire.
Well, he did. And Michael Jackson and whatever. And we sold 8 million records. His name's David Garrett, that probably nobody over here knows. But around the world, we had the biggest selling classical artist of all time. And what made it for me was when we went to those concerts and when we made the records, we were thinking, how are we going to visualize that song? So if it was Smooth Criminal or it was Viva La Vida.
Yeah.
How are we going to, or a U2 song mixed with the James Bond theme with Led Zeppelin? We're going to present it live. And after 12 years of that, I thought, I want to be in theatre. I want to deliver theatrical experiences. So the first one I did was a tour called A Night at the Opera.
Right.
I can't sit through an opera, but we all know the tunes. So we presented opera's greatest hits.
Okay. No.
Very much under the radar.
Yeah.
And it worked. It was all the tunes made very accessible.
Mm-hmm.
So it was opera's greatest hits. Then my love of soul music and working with Aretha and Tina and Whitney, there has to be a musical celebrating that era, or let's bring it up to date. So we're creating a musical called Soul Sisters. That's the working title.
Okay, nice.
I'm working with Nile Rodgers on it, which, you know, is a dream come true. Taking an icon.
Couldn't have found anyone bigger to write it with.
There really, I mean, there really isn't anyone who spanned that era.
There is not.
He produced them all.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't produce Whitney, but he worked with all the others, including Bowie and
everyone with
you know, leading up to Duran Duran and
Daft Punk,
and still to this day selling out everywhere. And it's a celebration. It's very much audience led. The three generations of women. So Aretha, the old legend, Tina, the superstar, and then we're basing it on like the Chapel Roan, Whitney, New Kid on the Block. But it's the Me Too movement comes into it, the patriarchy. So it's feeding the audience with a visual experience, but celebrating soul music in a contemporary way.
Is that? Are you close to finishing? How close?
Yeah, I like to think so.
Yeah.
I'm just comforted by the fact that I think Hugh Jackman took 9 years to get The Greatest Showman away.
Yeah.
So, you know,
how far into the project are you so far?
We've been on it for about 3 years, but not completely. We did, you know, we've had 3 versions of the script because everyone said to me, you've got nothing until you get the book right. Book meaning the script. Well, I've got the most extraordinary writer, Tori Allen Martin, who is just phenomenal. She's an actress in the West End. She's an actress on TV. But I came up with the concept. She has written 112 pages that just sings off the page. And most people say the hardest thing in theatre is to get the book right. We've got the book right. We've workshopped it. We filmed it.
And you've got a little unknown guy called Nile Rodgers helping with the music.
Yeah. So we're literally, tomorrow is a big meeting with everyone involved. What's the next step? We've written 4 new songs for it, which I think are just, well, I would say that because I co-wrote 2 of them, 3 of them. But the bar is there. I want to have new songs, old songs done in a completely new way. It's really exciting. And I think it's, you know, what we're doing is tapping into theatre has never been more popular. You cannot get into the West End. Everything's selling out. So let's celebrate instead of looking back and saying we can't make records anymore because there's no record market. And if there is, we're not seeing the income. We know who is, but we're not. So let's turn that into a positive. Let's give the audience another musical dimension, another experience.
Yeah. Rick, I feel like I've said very little throughout this conversation because that's not a negative. I'm sure everyone's quite happy to hear me speak a lot less, but there's just so much. Your career is unbelievable. Like, it really is. I think, you know, from every artist you've worked with, all the labels, the brand side, the sports, the classical, which we've almost not even touched on properly. The list is just endless. The journeys that you've been involved in, the changes across music, the artist development, the artist discovery, the explosion of brand partnerships, the sporting alliance with music. You've been involved in every single facet of the industry. More so, I think there's very few people that can say they've been involved in so much of what the music and event and partnership culture looks like today.
Because they are all partners. We couldn't do it. One can't do it without the other. So, you know, my lawyer used to say I'm an alchemist, which I took as an insult, but he meant, you know, bring the ingredients together and percolate them together. And that's the only way it can happen.
I guess a couple of things just to wrap up very quickly. How did you? Obviously, you've been involved in so many different facets of the industry. What would you say is the area that you've loved the most? Whether it's kind of heading up on the label side or the A&R artist discovery side or the sport brands, so many different areas. What would you say is
it's going to be a surprising answer. And I was doing a bit of it this morning. Songwriting.
Okay.
And one artist I haven't mentioned that I've worked with, Andrea Bocelli.
Oh.
And I mean, this sounds like name dropping, but this sort of sums it up. I worship the great tunes and I worship the singers who bring us those tunes. And in between that are the wordsmiths, are the lyricists. And I remember sitting with Bocelli in his home in 40 de Marmi. Yeah, I'm going to name drop. And Andrea had a meeting with Lucian Grange, and Lucian said, your next album has to be the greatest classical album ever made. What the fuck does that mean? And I remember saying to Andrea, why don't we take a classical tune or classical tunes, you become the lead instrument, we'll put lyrics to it. And I'd read that he'd written sometime, I feel obligated that if these great composers had the genius to give us these tunes 200-300 years ago, I have an obligation to find ways of presenting them anew, not just new songs, but keep the legacies going. And I've always felt that way. I always felt once a great song, represent it. And he said, well, go on. I said, no, my favorite piece of music in all the world is the Mozart Clarinet Concerto. It's just a great tune. It's a bit like, could be the Beatles, it could be the Beach Boys. It's a great 3-minute chorus, verse, intro, verse, chorus. He said, oh, I wouldn't touch Mozart. I thought, oh, here we go. And there was a piano behind him in his living room. And I said, will you play me your favorite classical tune? And he played me a thing called the Forêt Pavane. People know the tune.
It's my favorite classical tune.
Well,
actually.
Interesting. Because if you say to most people the Forêt Pavane, but you hum it. So he starts playing it. And I remember saying to him, there's no chorus. That's a fabulous verse. Why don't we create a new chorus and then take a moment that soars into Bocelli-esque? Because the way to treat Bocelli is you've got to give him that moment where he soars, just when you think he can't, because you think he's a tenor, but he gets notes that just make your eyes water.
Yeah.
So within a week, I came back to London and we wrote this song called Unanima, where we took the verse melody is exactly what he played, which is the Forêt Pavane, and we wrote this soaring chorus that soars and soars and soars, and I'm thrilled to say it went on to his next album, which was called S-I, and
I was going to say it's ironic, because he can't.
You're so right.
Sorry if that's offended anyone.
S-I, and the album was such a turning point because Decca, who are the most brilliant label, and Dick and Stainer, who's now the chairman, has the foresight to see how to keep a brand going. And if ever there's a brand that they've kept fresh, the idea is put him with duet artists who can bring him into the contemporary world. Yeah. So there was a duet with Dua Lipa and a duet with Ed Sheeran on that album. My song was the one sandwiched between the two. So we got a great hearing. That album.
This is recent. This is not.
This was a few years ago. Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
And I'm thrilled to say, celebrating a great tune with an incredible artist. And the funniest thing about all this, I wrote this great lyric for it, and then someone translated into Italian. So my lyric isn't on the album, but the Italian version is. But we still kept the English version.
Nice.
And we're now doing that with The Night at the Opera, the musical that we're bringing back. We're doing it arias that everyone knows the tune to, but we're doing a lot of them in English just to demystify.
Yeah.
And if anyone knows the biggest aria and nobody knows what it's about, just when you think how big this opportunity is, Nessun Dorma, nobody knows what it's about. But they do know the Vincerò, Vincerò. What that means is, I will win, I will win, I will win. It suddenly gives meaning.
It feels like quite a good life motto for you, considering the journeys that you've been on and been involved in.
Well, it's optimism. It's yes, there's loads of setbacks, but where there's a setback, is there an opportunity?
Final question for you. You've been in the industry since 70s. You said early 70s, mid 70s.
I wouldn't admit to that, but go on.
What would you say is the key to your longevity and your, the way you've adapted and stuff? You've gone through a bit of a Bowie, reimagining yourself in different makeups over time.
I think it started with Huey Green, give the audience what they want. Barry Manilow, give the audience what they want. The way he would craft a lyric or find lyricists to tell the story that connected with the audience. Clive Davis, none better at connecting artist, song, audience. And I think everything I'm doing now, whether it was from Three Lions or with Bocelli or the musicals, it's always with an eye and an ear on the audience.
Mhm.
And that's why, to answer your last question, I so love songwriting. It's an agony.
Yep.
I worship a guy called Don Black.
Yep.
Now, Don Black is our greatest living lyricist. He wrote Ben for Michael Jackson.
Mhm.
He was Andrew Lloyd Webber's lyricist on so many songs. And Don says that the job of lyric is to hug the contour of the melody. So when you've got some of these great melodies that honestly, if you knew the effect when a melody hits our brain, it is unlike anything else, any of the other senses, in manipulating our senses.
Mhm.
So we've got this incredibly powerful weapon called music. If you can then recharge it with a lyric that conveys something that the music is saying, I have a phrase I use, which is music makes you feel, words make you think. And I think if that's a recipe for a great song,
Mhm.
that's the joy that I have in music.
Excellent anecdotes to end this on, I think. Rick, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
This has been, although as I said before, you've told me story after story. I never get bored hearing them. You've given me so much more that I've not heard before. I'll definitely be picking your brains further on some of these bits. But it's been a pleasure having you on.
Thank
Like I
you
said,
so
it's
much.
a very, very different career to many of the people that we've had on the podcast so far. But I hope it's something that a lot of you guys can learn from and kind of take an inspiration from, because honestly, it is a career. It's an enviable career. And I'm sure there's many artists and individuals and industry figures out there who would thank you for your involvement in their journeys. So thank you for sharing all these
My
stories
pleasure.
and for what you've done and your contribution to music culture. And thank you all again for joining into another episode. As always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Music, Spotify, and on Instagram. We'll be back with another episode and a new series coming up very soon. But until then, give us a like and a subscribe, and we will see you on the other side.